Recording in progress.
There we go. Hello, everyone. At 6 p.m. and the June 6th regular council meeting will now come to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Patty, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Frank Baker.
Present.
Councilmember Leslie Otero. Here. Councilmember Lloyd Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Shirley. Here. Councilmember Mike Zabel.
Here.
Vice Mayor Glenn Gunn.
Present.
Mayor Dave Gaddis.
Here.
City Manager Lynn Reeves.
Here.
And City Attorney Randy Moore.
Present.
Thank you, Patty. Our first order of business is the approval of the agenda. I have two items that I would like to change, and then I'm going to ask the council if there's anything they would like to change. The first is the date on item 4. It should be 2021, not 2019. And then the second item is item 12 and 13. I think that they should be swapped. And the reason why is even though it's probably something that we can pass through pretty quickly, it's still something that someone may want to discuss. So I would like 13 to become 12 and 12 to become 13, and then the new 13 falls into the regular agenda.
I'll move to approve with those changes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the agenda is now amended. Do I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Motion to move.
Frank Baker,
Second.
Leslie Nazaro. All in favor?
Aye.
The amended agenda is approved. All right, let's move right on to item 2, which is citizen comments. If any citizen would like to address the council about a topic not already on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be called on. We ask that you limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Anyone would like to speak? Yes, ma'am. You in the far right corner, second row. You were first.
I'm going first.
Okay, that's fine.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Katie Cole with the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson, 600 Cleveland Street, Suite 800, Clearwater, Florida. I'm here tonight representing the Los Caracolas Condominium Association, and you had a number of other people raise their hands tonight because there are several residents and owners of other condominiums that are along the beach. And we wanted to speak to you tonight about the proposed ordinance that's been sent to FWC with respect to the swim buoys in the vessel exclusion zone. And first off, we understand that this has been going on for about a year, and unfortunately some of the meeting notices went to the general addresses of the condominiums, not to specific units or the management companies, and so there's been a bit of a game of catch-up for some of these owners to get an understanding of what's happening and why. And so we wanted to come tonight knowing that it's not on the agenda, but that you all have sent a proposed ordinance to Fish and Wildlife that is necessary to come into compliance with what the prior permit was. But the extent of that ordinance, in the opinion of many of these residents, goes too far. The addition of buoys over the number of buoys that are out there tonight or today is a concern. It's also a concern that if the choice is to have a vessel exclusion zone and a swim-only area versus what's there today, which is simply notice that there might be swimmers in the area and a no-wake zone, candidly, the owners along the beaches would prefer to have no buoys. There is not an issue today with boat traffic and swimmers and conflicts between the two. There's not an issue with a large number of boats anchoring in this area and attempting to swim up to shore and create the situation. And the addition of these buoys and the change of the status quo is not something that these residents would like to see. So I know that we have several here. If you all want to raise your hand, some others from some of, Jim Robbins with Los Pulse is also here and wants to say a few words, but we wanted to come tonight. We appreciate, I know Mr. Riggs has been in contact with some of the residents here. I've been in contact the past week with Mr. Mora. We understand that this is a work in progress with the FWC, and certainly wanted to make our opinion known to you all and then work together with the city on what the right solution is. So we appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to pause you for 1 second. I don't have a problem with anyone that wants to speak on this topic. Would everyone that's here to speak on this particular topic, please raise your hand? Okay, so what I would like to do is let's go ahead and take care of these first, and let's do it orderly. Each person, take your 3 minutes, come up, say your name, give your address, and then whenever you're finished, we'll just take the next one and we'll go right down the line. Okay, and that way it will expedite the meeting, and you'll be heard.
We certainly appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman.
And I'm Jim Robbins, 2523 Prospect Road, Tampa, Florida, 33629, but also a property owner at 2450 Gulf Boulevard, Las Caracolas. First, I want to say thank you for giving us a little time tonight. We have been playing catch up on this, and we certainly appreciate the city staff, the city attorney getting us up to speed with the information, so we now know what's going on. Just a brief comment. My family and I have been over here for over 25 years now. I'm a boater, distance swimmer, paddleboarder, and as Katie said, if the choice is between, I certainly appreciate the buoys that are there, but if the choice is needing to remove those because they're no longer compliant, we'd be in favor of that, but no designated swim zones or boat zones or additional buoys out there. Not seeing any problem. I think people are very respectful when they're operating motor vessels in that area for a host of reasons, but very respectful of the swimmers and others in the water. So others are going to echo that, but our condominium, 32 units there, and other condominiums we've been in touch with, I think, are of a similar view, and you may hear that here behind me. So thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Next.
Barbara Riles, 4601 West San Miguel Street, Tampa, Florida. We are owners of a unit at Soli Sombra, 2250 Gulf Boulevard, Unit G1. I have been in contact with all 16 owners at Soli Sombra, as well as owners at Aldea and Sonrisa. Across the board, everyone is against designating a boat zone and a swim zone. We feel that it's not necessary. There really are very few boats that come up close to the shore. And it is not necessary, and it will be unsightly, and we hope that you will respect our opposition and that you will help us with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tim Gibbons. I'm a registered boater at 2300 North Boulevard, Alabama County. This has come to my attention and my family's attention and the rest of the owners' attention. And it is our position that it is unneeded. My family has been owner and resident or owners of this unit since January of 1973. We are also voters. We're very respectful of it. And to my knowledge, there has never been an incident of any conflict between voters and swimmers. I run all the way from by boat from Avon Key down to Anclote, in no place else do I ever see this, that there's designated swim zones on those beaches. There used to be something at Clearwater Beach, and if it's there, I'm not aware of it. That's a different situation than we are. That's much more of a public beach. That we do have some public accesses that we've been granted in there. Again, we've never experienced any problem. We would like to work with the city council and make sure that everybody's informed on this, but if it came down to it, we would prefer be in compliance with FWC with no buoys versus having designated swim zone and additional buoys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Karen Mills. My address is 3006 West Euclid Avenue in Tampa, Florida. But I am also representing my husband who could not be here tonight. We are owners of 2450 Gulf Boulevard, which is Los Caracoles. And I'm going to read something that my husband asked me to read into the minutes. There is no confidence, substantial evidence that has been presented as to the need for swim zones. If the existing buoys are required to be removed by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, then prior to the city ordinance, there should be rescinded and not revised to create swim zones. The ordinance is unnecessary and represents an attempt by the city to tell people where they can and can't swim in the Gulf. The proposed ordinance has the potential of many unintended consequences, such as creating a boating zone whereby boats can gather, raft up, or even anchor along the beach. If this proposed states that these excluded areas shall be free from restrictions, so if the ordinance was adopted, how would these areas be controlled or governed? And then finally, the language of the proposed ordinance is written incorrectly as the swim zones are shown on the map are described as areas excluded from swim zones. But the bottom line is, in our 5 years of owning a place out here, we've seen very little boat traffic, and I just don't understand for long distance swimmers, open water swimmers, how they would be swimming along and then have to stop and get out and go to the next area where the swim zone started. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I very much appreciate you hearing our concerns about this and hope that you will consider them when this ordinance does come up for review. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mills. Anyone else on this topic? Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to other comments. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Please come up, state your name and your address.
Hello, my name is Nancy Dupois, and my address is 106 13th Street, Bel Air Beach. I'm a relatively new resident. I want to welcome you all. I received the magazine telling me all about the new council and the mayor and also. And I was glad to read that some of you in here said that you were interested in what the residents felt and had to say. So being a relatively new resident here, it's been about a year now, and when I was buying the property, the realtor was telling me all about that I was right across the street from the beach and how wonderful it was and all the things. And my daughter is a new resident here in Bel Air Beach as well, down off of 22nd Street. And so I said, okay, great, sounds great. And we came, we got settled, and I finally went across the street to go see the beach, and I was greeted by this massive sign that told me all the things that I couldn't do. And I was quite surprised, to say the least. And so anyway, it's taken us a while to get settled, and with the new council, when I started talking to different residents and they were introducing themselves to me, I heard so many stories, my head was going to explode. I heard that, you know, amongst the council was not well and the vibes were not good. I heard that there was negotiations going on about rescinding the shade code that had went through, because that was probably the one that threw me the most, that you couldn't have any shade at all. And then I heard that the prior mayor initiated a lawsuit, and I've heard so many things that I'm so perplexed now that I don't know where the city is on that issue. But I am very sad because I moved here. 10 of us moved here. The whole tribe came, all of us. And, you know, I have a granddaughter who has a great-grandson now. I have my daughter who resides here in Bel Air now, who is having a grandson. And when we plan to go to the beach, we plan to go to the beach to enjoy, not just walk the shoreline, not just go in the water and then leave. And so I guess I'm here today to try to find out where this issue stands and was it correctly passed, this code by the Bel Air Shores Council, and what are we doing in Bel Air Beach about this issue?
Thank you very much.
How will I know? Will someone give me, I'm not sure how this works.
Generally, during public comments, we do not respond.
Okay.
And I will say that this is an ongoing court case that we're not involved in, and there are, I maybe consider some progress is happening, but this is something that we really need to discuss at a different time.
Okay, well, I would appreciate that, and I would appreciate you taking into consideration that there are families that would love to go to the beach and spend 3 or 4 hours as a family at the beach and be able to be protected. I can't take these children to the beach and have them exposed for that long a period of time without shade. It's just not appropriate and not healthy. So I thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor, I make a motion that you bring up the discussion you had with Bel Air Shores at the last work session about the umbrellas. So this resident doesn't have to stay here all night. It was a pretty productive meeting you had.
I would prefer to reserve those comments until the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Not at the beginning. All right, we're on to item 3, which is the law enforcement report from Corporal Duncan, the Mills County Sheriff's Department. Corporal.
Good evening, Council. The biggest highlights of the city's crime statistics for the month of April is going to be, there were a total of 15 arrests. However, none of them included any of the residents of the city. As you know, with the beach, the causeway, and people coming from Clearwater Beach, when our deputies are out doing traffic enforcement, we tend to catch people coming from all different directions, and the stops just happen to happen in your city, so they get tagged being within the city. Of the 15 arrests, 6 of them were all traffic related, whether it be DUIs, driving on a suspended license, things of that nature. There were a couple of drug possession arrests, which again came from traffic stops. There was a domestic battery, which was from someone who was staying at a lodging facility here on vacation who was not a resident of the city. Deputies doing traffic enforcement issued a total of 171 warnings or citations within the city. There are also 36 parking warnings or citations issued at the beach accesses. And those are pretty much the highlights outside of the normal house checks, neighborhood checks, traffic control, getting out and monitoring the beach accesses, and just being highly visible for the residents and people passing through the city of Bel Air Beach.
I have a question and statement. First of all, best chief, can you hear me okay back there? Okay, good. Our beach, I've been out on the beach, obviously, out there swimming, looking around, but it's considerably eroding. We have no beach renourishment in sight right now. And we've seen incidents with deputies patrolling in an SUV on the beach, I mean, maybe 30 foot of sand. Asking this council member, can you use the ATV that you have stored in the house back here instead of using the SUV on the beach? I mean, we're just trying to conserve our sand if possible.
That is definitely an option that we have. The deputies that you see on the beach, those SUVs are actually 4-wheel drive. That's why they're able to go out there, because a normal one of our normal Tahoes would not be able to make it through that soft sugar sand to get to the hard pack sand. But the Polaris side-by-side that we have in the garage back there is much smaller, and I can get with Captain Liner and give him your suggestion and your concern about the beach erosion and being able to use that vehicle versus.
Right, you just kind of pointed it out. You said you got a four-wheel drive SUV plowing the sand, so that's what we're trying to get to. You got to save what sand we have right now, because they're not making it work. Second of all, it's not a mystery that the Gulf Causeway two-lane turn has had a lot of community comments. Can you point to, have we had an increase in vehicle accidents and citations specifically about the two-lane turn since it's been put in place?
I know it's been questions that we've had asked numerous times, and people who are familiar with this area, they navigate it well now that it's been there for quite some time. And fortunately enough, if someone is in the outer lane and they're going to make a turn toward Indian Rocks, the people who are in the left lane are nice enough to allow them to merge in without there being any kind of issue. So as far as any real uptick in any kind of crashes or any violations that are any kind of red flags, we have not seen that much of an increase.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other council members?
Yeah,
I just saw on the first page here that there was a sex offense and 3 assault, sex offense. Could you elaborate on that? They're kind of behind.
Correct. In the way that our system tracks, our reporting system tracks things, is that if someone makes an allegation, the allegation that they make, unless we can say that it did not occur, that's how the report gets filed. That particular incident that you're referring to is a incident that occurred where someone ended up at a local facility, as far as lodging facility, that had been in Clearwater in Tampa, I believe, out partying. They woke up at the lodging facility and they felt as though something occurred during the course of the evening, but they weren't sure where it occurred. So we documented what they could remember, and because they could not recall exactly where it took place, it happens to be that since they were staying at that facility, again, like when we do traffic stops, if somebody's coming from Clearwater and they happen to, come down Gulf Boulevard and we stop them here, because we stopped them here or the call originates from the city limits, it gets tagged here. Okay. So it may not be something that actually occurred here, but because it's where it originated, that's where our reporting system places it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Baker?
How often do you guys schedule beach patrols, as Councilmember Sable spoke about?
There is, we try to do one at least once per shift. In the evenings, we usually try to do them during sunset. That way we can address any of the ordinance issues that, are hot button topics. Plus, check the parking lots, make sure people have the proper permits and whatnot. But it's usually in the mornings, about sunrise, when we get most of your foot traffic, you have your people that are out exercising, walking the beaches, and usually sunset are the 2 times that we try to. Now, deputies could come out more frequently, depending upon what the parking lots look like. If the parking lots look full, then obviously there's a lot of people out on the beach. They would give it another pass to make sure everything is good and that there's no violations, or sometimes people just like to come up and talk to us and ask us questions.
Yeah, I was pertaining more or less the beach patrol itself. you guys are great, I mean, on everything, but I see a lot in the parking lots, but it seems like this past year I haven't seen much of the beaches.
I can definitely check the numbers and see what statistically has been done, but I know that there is a standing order for at least one during the day and one during the evening.
Is that the contracted order?
Yes, yes, that is the order that, from my understanding, Captain Liner has spoken with the council in the past, and that has been established, and it is within the city responsibilities for the deputies that are out here.
Okay. Just curious, whenever you pull into one of those parking lots and you see someone that doesn't have a permit or a sticker, what's the normal routine for you?
Well, education is a wonderful thing. There are some people who want to push the envelope because they know that these parking lots are so close to the beach. So there are a handful of people who we've come into contact, education the first time, the second time, then you get a parking violation. But since it is private property outside of issuing violations, there's not much more we can do than that. Once the parking violation is issued, then it's whether or not they pay it or how it goes forward from there. But it's education first, and then write the violation, dig in the pockets, and then hopefully people are.
I think that more than likely this council will be having that conversation on increasing patrolling and then trying to figure out, we've already started conversations about what to do about the parking lot, the accesses, and how to handle that. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for the report.
Absolutely. And in regards to the beach patrol, I will get with Captain Liner in regards to the side-by-side versus the top ones. Thank you. Yes. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
John Hanson, 22nd Street. My question's for the corporal. When he gives the statistics, it's blended where it's warnings and citations. We don't often hear how many warnings, how many citations. And the last point that was made was parking. And I was listening, and he said the first thing is education, okay? I'm not well, in my mind, the education is quite clear, it's simple. When you go to the entrance of each access parking areas, the education is clear and simple. Permit required. It's not open for arbitration. It's not open for discussion or compromise. Clear and simple. And we've heard stories in the past about deputies going up and down the beach looking for people that have parked illegally. So my thing is, and as you just mentioned, Mr. Mayor, we need to be looking at this. We don't need to educate anymore. The education's right there at the entrance to the parking. No tiki, no washing. Plain and simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Jules Chandler, 3207 Hibiscus Drive West, Delaware Beach. Regarding the any violations or accidents that we had or didn't have on that left turn signal, I, as well as most everyone here that's on the north side of the bridge, would be turning left. Sometimes you're in the right left turn lane, sometimes you're in the left turn lane. And people are not always kind with letting you in. People are always trying to, not always, most of the time, it just seems like to me, it seems like it's not working. And the residents that I'm speaking with are saying that it's not working. I think it was initiated to ease up traffic, but now, the way it is now, you cannot turn left on a yellow flashing light. Whereas before you'd stop, and if there was no oncoming traffic, you could turn left. You cannot do that anymore. So traffic is backed up the same amount that it was backed up before. But unfortunately, if the sheriff's car is there, you know people are going to be paying attention to the traffic. Kind enough to let somebody come in, not necessarily honking or giving the finger for somebody that they think is cutting them off. That being said, so it's not really apples to apples, I think. I just think that it's something that we should look at again. I don't believe that it's working. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, now we move to the code enforcement report. Deputy Platka is not here tonight, and City Manager Reeves will lead us.
Mayor and Council, you've got a copy of the code enforcement report. We have 52 incidents that happened over the month. Most of them are checking permits. We had 11 items that weren't, there was no violation, even though we got a call to check something, or they thought it was a parking violation or what have you. We did start a process with trying to encourage the rental registration at a couple of the condos where it was lacking. We did start a program there where the deputies going to check to see. And I will say it became fruitful because we had about 12 people that paid their rental registration fee that were rented. So that was a fruitful situation. We had 11 permit checks, 3 parking issues, and 4 landscaping. Other violations are just things that we follow up on. But for the most part, it was a relatively quiet month.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions? I do have one, Mr. Reeves. As I drive around at Bella Beach, I noticed that there are a few addresses that have trees, shrubs, hedges that are beyond a clear violation. They're literally hanging out over the streets. They are blocking neighbors' views trying to exit their driveways, and they don't seem to be. I don't think we're enforcing that properly, or maybe I'm missing something, and maybe we need to look at the code again. But definitely something that I'd like to have a deeper conversation with and find out what can we do about this. Is it just a directive at this point?
Yeah, it's code enforcement officer. We've had a few, I will tell you, in the last week, in fact, we had a few, and we've sent a couple letters out about those situations. Typically, they'll be occurring. The same person's doing it again. You tell them to cut it, and then they cut it, and 2 months later, it's back in the same situation. So the ordinance does say you can't go out beyond the curb line and things of that nature. So I'll relay that to the code officer, and we can follow up with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? No? All right. Let's move on to item 4, which is consideration of accepting the annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year. Oh, before we do this, Peggy, what happened to Vice Mayor Dunn?
He's there.
He is there. Okay, there he is. He's square. I'm sorry, you were not a member of the Brady Bunch for a few seconds. All right. right, great. So anyway, back to item 4, consideration of accepting the annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2021. First off, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Jody Shirley and second by Mike Roberts. Okay, do we have a representative from Salt Marsh, Cleveland and Guns, CPA? Yep, right there.
Yes, sir.
Let's hear it.
Good evening. My name is Chuck Landers with Salt Marsh, Cleveland and Gunn. I have the fortunate opportunity to serve as the audit shareholder for the city of Bel Air Beach. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to serve as your auditors. In the past, you've seen Janine Bittinger and Richard Christini. They have since retired. I do believe they still may be doing some consulting work around, but they're no longer with Salt Marsh. And I have the privilege of serving as the audit shareholder. I believe you have the draft financial statement in your packet.
Yes, we do.
I happy to go through it, not in a lot of detail, but the most important thing is that it is an unmodified opinion, so that's the cleanest opinion that an auditor can give. So we're saying that that is what the city has. There's about a dozen pages that I would point out some information on, but we don't have to go into a lot of detail other than that. So I'm kind of at your mercy of how much detail would you like to go into.
Well, if you have a Reader's Digest summary you'd like to give us, that would be a great start.
All right, Reader's Digest. We're going to just talk about a few numbers then, some that I would say are worth discussing. On page 17, this is the statement of net position. At the bottom of page 17, there's a section called net position. I'll point out that the net investment in capital assets is 10.5, almost 10.6 million. And then the unrestricted net position is 5.3 million for total net position that the city has of 15.894 million, almost 15.9 million. That is an indication that the assets of the city far exceed the liabilities of the city by approximately 15.9 million. So that's an important number that I would point out. I would then turn to page 23. This is the fund balance, budget, and actual for the general fund. You'll see that in the middle of the page is the final budget for the general fund. About halfway down, total revenues were budgeted at $2,377,000. Actual came in at $2,708,000 for a favorable variance of $331,000. I would then jump to the bottom, almost to the bottom of that page, for the net change in fund balance. The third column over, actual increase of $192,200, which is a favorable variance of almost $185,000 over budget. Tremendous. I would turn the page then to page 24, and the only item I'll point out here is that in 2021, the city created a stormwater fund. And you'll see that this is the statement of net position that includes the stormwater fund and the marina fund, and then a combination for those two funds combined. I would only just point out that page because the stormwater fund was new in 2021. I would then draw your attention to page 44. This is note 5, the change in capital assets. And this is a reconciliation that takes you from the capital assets at the beginning of the year, the additions, the dispositions, and the transfers to the end of the year. Being a municipality, that is an important amount of information to understand what the city has, what's being added, what's being disposed of. So it just points you to that, point that out to you. We'll continue with further good news on page 85. Municipal audits have to be done in accordance with governmental auditing standards. This report is the independent auditor's report on internal control, financial reporting, and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards.
There are the two most important sentences in this two-page report. The first one is the next to the last sentence on the first page. Given these limitations during our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we considered to be material weaknesses. That's the sentence you're looking for on that page. If you turn the page to page 86, in the paragraph compliance and other matters, the last sentence of that paragraph, the results of our tests disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. That's what you want to hear in those reports.
Absolutely.
Then the last bit is the very last page on page 89. This is the independent auditor's report on compliance with section 218.415 of Florida statutes regarding the investment of public funds during the year. And our opinion is, in our opinion, the city of Bel Air Beach complied with all material respects with the aforementioned requirements for the year ended September 30, 2021. So all in all, you have 4 positive opinions to this report.
Thank you very much. Council? Mr. Gunn?
I would say that the one thing I did see, and I was used to seeing in past reports, was trends and forecasts. And I don't know if that's something that we just don't do anymore, but it was interesting to read that stuff and draw your own conclusions when you look back at the different years.
Yes, sir. Trends and forecasts, that would be information that is outside of the basic financial statements. There is the statistical section, which shows historically information, and you can come to your own conclusions on trends from that. But that, I believe what you're referring to would be outside of the basic financial statements. It could be included. There's nothing to say that additional information cannot be there. So if the city council would like to have city staff include additional non-required supplemental information, we can do that.
Where was this statistical information?
The statistical information starts, if we turn to the...
I see section 3 right now.
Did you find it, sir?
I did.
And I would encourage everyone to read the management discussion and analysis as well. That's kind of a plain English version of all the numbers and notes that us accountants talk about.
Any other questions? All right. In that case, comes to a vote to accept the annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2019.
Motion to accept.
Oh, you're right, it's 2019 there too. Okay, we already have a motion. We do. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So, all right, we accept the report. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get the final one issued.
All right, now we are on to item 5, which is the city attorney's report. Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pleasure being here at my first official meeting, though we've had the opportunities thus far to sit in on a workshop and a meeting with the CAC last month. We are off to a good start. I met with Manager Reeves for a few hours on Friday to talk about a series of action items, begun preparing and transmitting research on some of the pending issues, beginning to review ordinances that have been prepared and are in the hopper to try and advance those and make sure they've gone under my own independent review. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have or concerns to this point.
Council? Vice Mayor Nunn? No? I do have one. Your evaluation and planning, does any of that have to do with the sign ordinance?
I'm not specifically, though I have that as an action item based on the research, or rather the interview process that we went through, I've not yet reached that issue, as there were some that were more time sensitive, namely the FWC buoys issues and others that have been percolating. I also You were all sent a memorandum that I prepared concerning text messages as public records and digital media as public records. That was not, I sent it without a lot of context. That was not prepared as a result of anything specifically in this community. I've been doing that research on behalf of a handful of communities based on litigation I've been involved in, and thought it best that all of our elected officials be aware of that, and that's been sent it's been sent here and in the other communities that I serve in. Back to your question about the sign code, as you know, tonight we're talking about the interim manager. As that interim manager establishes the priorities and needs, we'll certainly address where they feel that fits in based on the existing needs and need to catch up on that legal issue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else? No? All right. Moving on to item 6, which is the city manager's report. Take it away, Mr. Reeves.
Mayor and Council, the report is in your agenda packet. From some of our discussions over the last couple of meetings, the drainage project evaluation will start. We started looking at doing some hammering. Gulf Boulevard undergrounding, we're still waiting on Duke Energy to come forward with their bid and final estimate and design. 7th Street boat ramp renovation along with the 16th. We've given a notice of award and the contract has been executed, and the company is in the process of giving me some timelines for when materials will be delivered. City seawall project, that's on hold for funding. At some point, the city council needs to determine if they want to replace the playground in Bayside Park, a small kids playground. And tonight we're doing second reading of 94, which has been a long time coming. I did get information today that's not on this report. The sheriff's increase is going to be 5.18%. You were given your budget at your seat tonight, the updated budget with the current property valuation. And we have a budget work session on the 20th of June. And we still are waiting on waste management. That's really the only other thing that's outstanding that we don't have a final cost on. Because they are going to ask for some additional increase. That's it.
Council? Vice Mayor? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Reeves. Now we're on to the city clerk's report. Ms. Gentry, you have the floor.
The main thing is the city manager search process, so I'm doing spreadsheets for all of the scoring for each applicant, and then when that's complete, the committee will meet again and review those so that they can get it to council. And then for the future projects, these are just things that are in the archive room that need to be, on an ongoing basis, that need to be done. So scheduling future construction and reorganizing, we have a big condominium cabinet that's full of the plats and the blueprints, so straighten that up. That's it.
Any questions for Ms. Gentry?
Member Mr. Mayor, we have a citizen comment. Sorry, we have a citizen comment.
Yes. Oh, there you go. Mr. Hanson, please step up to the podium.
John Hansen, 103 22nd Street. Question really is for the city manager. I've been following this. The Gulf Boulevard underground. Do we have any explanation as to why Duke Energy is dragging its anchor? And do they not have a drop dead date to give us a binding cost?
Well, they gave us a binding cost, and then when we asked for them to update the cost, it went up 30%. So we went back to them and have asked them to relook at it, and I've had some discussion with them about there's some credits that we got on the of your states on underground. So I've asked them about that, and I have been in contact with them. They're redeveloping their cost.
I recall that conversation from last month's report, so just worried about things going through the roof. You know, we went through this last week with the bid on the stormwater. Thank you.
Just for future, just to let everyone know, it's generally not a back and forth conversation with the city manager, the city attorney, or the city clerk. That's why I did not call on anyone, and I went ahead and a council member called on you, but generally I'm not doing that. So that's not the way that this council runs, and we'll reserve our comments for the beginning of the meeting or during agenda items, and this is not part of the regular agenda. So I apologize if there's any confusion, but I just wanted to make that clear. All right, let's move on to number 8.
Mayor,
Yes, sir. Mr. Gunn?
I'm still talking about the city clerk report. I guess I had a question. We're talking about the city manager hiring process. We were pretty diligent in establishing a timeline and some of the processes and some durations and stuff. I'm just wondering, are we ticking down that timeline like we kind of outlined it, or are we sticking to the timeline that we kind of forecast, or has that changed? And also, what are we looking at for the conclusion for the city manager hiring process? When would we foresee that being complete?
Yes, I think we're doing very well on the timeline. And then as far as completed, I really don't, can you help me with that, Lynn? As far as when will the completion be? We have dates set, but.
Yeah, I don't, unfortunately, I don't have the calendar in front of me, but there was a calendar that was sent out to all the council members.
The next meeting was going to be like this 8.
Right, and Patty's, I know she's working on the scoring sheets to get we got everything in, and she's working on putting scoring sheets together for a spreadsheet to give to the Citizens Advisory Council, have a meeting to confirm who their 5 candidates are, and then after they have their confirmation, that will be given to the city.
Now let me clarify. You're not scoring the candidates, correct? No. You're compiling the score sheets and handing the data packets off.
That's correct. Yes.
I just want to also make sure, so we went through that schedule twice. We had the changes from city manager, I submitted those back, but I still haven't seen those back from you, that we have an approved timeline.
I thought we sent those back out.
Which one?
The updated one that
I remember seeing an updated timeline, and that did have the ending. It had the complete.
I think it's August.
The day one for the end.
But I don't have it in front of me. But there was what you sent back, there was not much modification.
Yeah, and I don't think that was a hard timeline. I believe that our original discussion was it could skew one way or the other.
Right.
That was our general guideline. Yes, sir, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, and to that point, I guess what I would just like to see is that outline with check marks and dates completed or whatever, so we can kind of monitor how we're doing. Are we gaining? Are we losing track? I mean, I guess I'm looking for a little more definitive progress report rather than a time frame for completion. I guess if you can show me that we're sticking down all different processes, then it kind of makes sense whether we're ahead of the process or behind, and we're not going to complete on time. That's all.
Yes, we are doing that. And so right now what I'm doing is doing the final one to get all the numbers in. Then we can set the date for the next meeting, which was the 7th or 8th. That was on the timeline that was sent out. I mean, I can send it out again if the vice mayor doesn't have it, but we did send it out revised. And then, like Lynn said, it's kind of in flux because as each part comes due, then that determines a date for the next one. But I feel like we're sitting pretty close to the original timeline.
Yeah, I think we're very close. We might be slipping a day or two on the scoring because I think we were a little aggressive with it.
We'll
But
be
Patty-
out 2 days.
Right.
Yeah.
And Patty was, and because of the COVID issue, we're behind a little bit. But she's working on them. She can probably tell you how far she is along with 28 applicants, and then she's going to do a one sheet that basically says this is what every person scored.
Okay. I think what Vice Mayor Gunn, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, would you just maybe update us all in an email where we stand? That's right.
That's what I was gonna say. I think Vice Mayor Gunn is indicating that we're kind of in a update black hole and we really don't know what's going on. Any other questions? All right. Let's move on to ordinance number 2201. This is the second reading. Mr. Mora, would you please read the title of this ordinance?
Happily, Mr. Mayor, I'm pulling up, just taking that page in the agenda materials. Ordinance number 22-01. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Bel Air Beach, Florida, providing for amendments to sections 94-1, 94-2, 94-6, 94-8, 94-62, 94-69, 94-161, 94-217, 94-251, and 94-256 of the City Code of Ordinances pertaining to zoning, providing for incorporation of recitals, providing for approval of amendments to sections 94-1, 94-2, 94-6, 94-8, 94-62, 94-69, 94-161, 94-217, 94-251, and 94-256 of the City Code of Ordinances, providing for a copy to be kept on file, providing for severability, providing for the repeal of all ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date. This has been a second and final reading of ordinance number 22-01 by title only.
Thank you very much. Before I open discussions on your motion, Frank Baker, do I have a second?
Second.
What was the nature of the motion made? Sorry, it was just, I need a motion and then it was a motion.
This is consideration of ordinance 22-01. This is the second reading.
No, I understand that. I guess my finer point is the more appropriate parliamentary approach is to say I move to approve or move to pass or to deny.
Motion made, I understand.
And it's just saying motion doesn't indicate what that motion is.
Mr. Baker, would you like to clarify?
I move to approve the second reading.
Is that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Sorry for the interruption.
I'm sorry.
And who made the second? Was it Judy Short? Mr. Baker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was thoroughly discussed over a couple work sessions, and again, at the last council meeting, I believe the first reading was passed unanimously. I bring it back to you for citizens' comments now.
Thank you. Other council members? No? All right, let's take it to the citizens. Do we have any citizen comments? All right, back to the council. Mr. Baker, do you have the last word?
Please take your vote.
All right. Before we do, Patty, has this ordinance been noticed in publication?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, Patty, let's do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Baker?
Yay.
I'm sorry, say that?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Notaro?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Shirley? Aye. Councilmember Zabel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gunn?
Aye.
Mayor Gaddis?
Yes, so it passes unanimously, 7-0. Thank you to everyone who worked on this, and Patty, you know what to do. All right, we are on to the consent agenda, and we changed a couple of things, but I think I've got this right. We're going to be discussing, or not discussing, but passing items 9, 10, 11, and what used to be 13 that is now 12. So this is for approval of the May 2nd, 2022 City Council meeting minutes, approval of May 5th, 2022 special City Council meeting minutes, approval of May 16th, 2022 special City Council meeting minutes, and a proclamation designating June 15th, 2022 as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Leslie Matero, do I have a second?
Second.
Is that Frank?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda passes. And we move on to item number 13. All right, this is to authorize the city manager to execute assignment of engineering services agreement, Gould and Associates, acquired by SEPI Incorporated. The staff recommends continuation of the agreement. Before we do that, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Leslie Notaro. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mike Zabel. All right, Leslie, you have the floor.
I don't really have any comments, Lynn.
Yes, Mayor and Council, this is Dual and Associates has been purchased by SEPI Engineering, and we did the same thing, and I did for when Davison Christine was purchased by Saltmarsh. I did send this to the city attorney previously, and he said as long as the current agreement is, which it is, we have a current contract with an engineering firm, that we can assign this. So they're just asking for pretty much the same thing we did with Saltmarsh, just the execution of the assignment.
Any other comments from the council? I have one, Mr. Moore. Just curious if you've been able to look this over at all.
I looked it over as much as part of the agenda materials that have been circulated in advance of the meeting. As a general operation in legal parlance, the acquisition of an entity by another entity and assigning its rights is fairly customary. I spoke with the manager on Friday concerning the agenda generally. If there were any legal concerns, one was not raised relative to this particular agreement.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the citizens. Any citizen comments? So, back to the council. All right, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Reeves, you can proceed. Now we are on to item 14. This is consideration of appointment of member to the Planning and Zoning Board. And, his name is Arhart McIntyre. And this is to fill the vacancy of one person on a 5-member board. There are currently only 4 board members, and this board does not have alternates. To begin with, do I have a motion? Joey Shirley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Lloyd Roberts. All right. It is my understanding that Mr. McIntyre was unable to attend tonight, but just in case, is he here? Oh. All right. Well, in that case, Ms. Shirley, you have the floor.
I don't have much to say. We haven't heard anything from the planning and zoning board. So just as a note, I would like to have them report to us.
Sounds like a good idea. How long has it been, Mr. Reeves?
It's probably been well over 6 months. We'll ask the chair.
I got to know Mr. McIntyre recently, and I think he'll be a great addition to the board, and I bet he will encourage the other members to do so. Other than that, let's go to the citizens. Any comments? No? All right, let's go back to the council. Any comments? Okay, seeing that there is only one candidate.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Mayor.
Oh, Vice Mayor Dunn, sorry about that. I'm still getting used to this little box up there.
Now, I guess my question goes to the protocol of how we're going to legitimize this process. I guess I was informed by the city clerk that there was some question about how we were going to do this. And because there was only one person, the question arose whether there was going to be a vote for this, or whether that person was just going to be blanket moved into their position. So I guess I'm giving it some thought, and my question is, because people on boards and committees serve at the pleasure of the council, in my mind, is necessary, even if there's only one person, that person has to be appointed by the council. Because I think there may be some future possibility where one person is available to fill a vacancy, but that person may not be the person with the qualifications or the temperament to fill that role. So in order to avoid any future problems, I think it's necessary for us to establish a precedent in this thing and say, hey, even if it's only one person, we need to legitimize the process and say, yes, that's the person who wants to fill that vacancy. So that's where I just state my opinion, and as the chair, that's your decision. Thank you.
Let me share my thoughts on that. I did put some thought into it today, and I think it will have us covered with the method of voting that we're about to do, which was, I was going to call on Patty for a roll call vote, and that's where you have the option to say yes or no. And we all know that it takes at least 4 people to pass a vote. So I think the system works. I wasn't going to ask for an all in favor. It was more of the typical vote. Did you see something out of the ordinary, or is it just because you're remote?
No, I guess not just because I'm remote. I just wanted to ensure that the process was there, that we were going to have accountability to legitimize the process of everybody, a majority appointee. So that's all I had.
Okay, and I will add that there was one, that the next vote will go differently than the first vote. The first vote is an easy one. The second one is not so easy. So, but we'll go from there. Any other comments from the council?
If I may add to just address this procedurally, the Councilmember Gunn's instincts are correct, and your anticipated process is correct. An applicant's submission for consideration absent any other contender doesn't entitle them to the seat. This body is well within its right to allow a vacancy to remain. I'm not suggesting you should here, but if it was your prerogative to say we'd rather have the vacancy than whomever has submitted, you need not necessarily establish precedent by your decision tonight, but just doing so is perfectly appropriate. The board members are appointed by this body, and this body is not bound in its discretion in that regard.
Thank you for that comment.
Can I add to that? In the meeting that Mr. McIntyre is appointed, what is our process to allowing him, to letting him know that he's been appointed? We just call him and tell him so? Or is there a document that we say, we appointed you to this position, but you're serving at the pleasure of the council, and it's kind of an agreement that they understand that they could be removed at some point, because clearly that's been an issue for us.
I sent them an email. I don't put that statement in it that you said. I mean, you can put anything in there that, you deem proper, but they received an email saying they were appointed.
And I would add to that, your code is the contract that's really binding here. If there's a contract to be had, I don't like to characterize it that way, but it's the binding governing document. Separately, while I'm new to this position in many of my other communities, as we get members on elected and appointed bodies as well, I try to make an effort to set a time to meet with them, to sensitize them to the ways their life has changed by becoming a public or semi-public official in the ways of the Sunshine Law and Public Records Law, because a lot of your volunteers are accustomed to serving in voluntary bodies in your community at large, whether that's Rotary or the Chamber, and they're used to doing things that are just per se not permissible. We wouldn't want a new member to start creating problems inadvertently just by their zeal by saying, well, I want to meet with the chair to talk about this new application next month and things like that. So I will, it's my intention, subject to staff's permission and use of resources in that regard, to reach out to them and at least, if not have a full-on meeting with them, at least provide them with materials for their review and consideration as they acclimate to the position.
Maybe in your email you could reference the section of the code.
I send them the link to the sunshine, government in the sunshine, and the ethics.
I mean, the city code about serving on that.
Right. I'm not sure if I do that or not, but yeah, I can.
Probably not a bad idea to maybe hand that literature off to everyone that serves on our boards or committees, so that they all understand and have all been given the same information. Okay, so Patty, let's do a roll call.
That's it. You had mentioned earlier that you knew Mr. McIntyre.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, if you wanted to, I give you his application very thoroughly, if you can add to that any information that you may have, or another council member, or another person, a citizen, that I think might help us a little bit.
Well, let's start with citizens. Is there anyone out there that would speak on Mr. McIntyre's behalf? No? Okay. Anyone on council?
Did I miss why he isn't here tonight? Reason?
He did not say, Patty.
He's out of town.
Okay. That's fine. Okay. You know what? I've spoken with him whenever I was running for office, and got to know him a little bit on both. And seemed like a nice guy, very knowledgeable, very professional, and I think that he would be a great asset. As far as his qualifications, I really didn't see anything in particular to our city, but I did see the executive leadership. I see he has a very extensive 40 years, in fact, and his professional life. And I don't know, it just seemed like a sharp guy and somebody that I would highly recommend.
I was impressed by the last section. Why would you like to be considered as a candidate for service on the planning and zoning board? It was attracted to the peace and tranquility, isolation from commercial infringement, to protect and preserve the attractive qualities of Bel-Air Beach. And I think that's what we need our planning and zoning board to do.
Absolutely. Any other comments? All right. So, let's take it to a vote. Patty?
Councilmember Baker,
Approve. Yes.
Councilmember Notero,
Yes?
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
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 Thank you. Councilmember Shirley,
Yes.
Councilmember Zabel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dunn,
Aye.
Mayor Gaddis.
Yes. So that's 7-0, and we welcome Mr. McIntyre to the Planning and Zoning Board, and we look forward to getting to know him better. All right, now we are on to number 15, which is consideration of appointment of Park and Recreation Board member and an alternate board member. We have two candidates. I'm calling them out in the order that their application was received. First is Carolyn Cornley, and the second one is Patty Roberts. All right, this is to fill the vacancy of one person on a 5-member board and one of the 2 vacancies for alternates. There are currently only 4 board members, and this board does not, oh, sorry, copied something off there. All right, so before we get started, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Jody Shirley, do I have a second?
Second.
Question, what are we moving for? Because are we moving for one person for a regular member, one for an alternate member?
What we're going to do is we're going to knock out both at the same time. Okay, and I'll explain that, but we can go ahead. Whenever I say consideration, I name them both. And so who made the first motion? That was Jody Shirley. Would you like to clarify, please?
Yeah, I move to consider both ladies that have applied for the position as a regular member, and we'll be voting on it once we hear from them.
Thank you. Any other clarification? No? Okay, great. So, Ms. Thornley, you are here, so if you'd like to speak, please come on.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Caroline Cornelli. I live at 2204 Bayshore Drive between 22nd and 23rd. I've been serving on the Board of Adjustments for the last 5 years. I've lived in the area now for 6 years. And I've really enjoyed getting to know some of the community members through my board activities and just being supportive of this great community. I feel so honored to live here. The reason for me wanting to move into the Parks and Recreation Board is I thought that was a much better fit for my skill set, my background. I've been in finance for over 20 years, and I have great planning skills, so I'd like to lend my planning skills to the board and help manage the financial aspects. So I really hope to be able to contribute in that capacity.
Thank you. First off, let me apologize for mispronouncing it.
That's okay.
Second, do we have any questions from the council? Over.
If put to the board, what would you like to do besides the finance? I mean, what are your thoughts for increasing community participation?
I think what stood out to me is for one of the last events that I live in the community, I'm pretty active here, I'm always running, and I didn't even know about the event for the Sinatra event. And so I think we have to do, look at how we're advertising our events and to get the word out. There were some signs, and we're really how our community outreach and how we get in touch with our community members so that we have greater participation and really understand what are the type of events that our community members would enjoy. So by just looking at what we have good attendance on, what are people giving us, having communities having suggestion boxes of what they would like to see in the community, or just getting the word, finding out from our community members what activities they would enjoy would help to increase participation.
Thank you.
You're currently on the Board of Adjustment, correct?
I resigned from that board, Leslie.
Any other questions? Let's go to the public real quick. Any questions? All right, back to the council. Okay, I have one. Ms. Cornelli, if you are not selected as a board member, are you willing to serve as an alternate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
What is the differentiation? Does the alternate still participate in all the meetings?
I believe any alternate has the option of participating, but they would not be considered a voting member if the board or committee is full of conflict. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cornelli. All
I have
right.
a question. If the board, we have a meeting and only 4 members show, and the alternate comes in replace, then they are voting, right? Then they're still voting at that point.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure I was clear.
Okay, next up is Ms. Roberts. Would you like to come up and speak?
While she's on her way, if you don't mind, I do know her a little bit. She's been babysitting our grandchildren, 73 and 1, all day today. I did notice when I was tracking her, she did stop off at a little club place, so it was for medicinal purposes only. So if she's not speaking correctly, please forgive her.
I don't want to talk on the microphone because I have a cold. It's not COVID though. I've tested twice. Okay. So can you hear me without without the mic?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So now that he's introduced me,
Can't Glenn Gunn hear you.
Vice Mayor, can you hear that mic?
thank you. That's okay. So I'm Patty Roberts. I do have a connection with one of the board members. I don't know if that makes a difference. It will not to me. I do want to serve on this because I'm an active person, physically active. I do not have the financial skills of this lovely lady that I met last week at the meeting, but I am a very active person and I love recreation and outdoor activities. So that's what my skill sets will be. I'll plant flowers and dig holes, and he can tell you I'm the laborer at our house. He's brains. So that's why I signed up for this committee, because I really want to be involved. I don't want him to be the only one involved in the family. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the council?
Yes, if put on the board, what would you like to see, or what would your plans be?
Well, some of the things that I've already discussed with Tammy and just people is I like Christmas decorations, and so I would like to beautify the place in that type of activity. The medians, I would like to see more plants, either flowers or other variegated plants in the medians and in the on 22nd Street. Anything to beautify areas, and like I said, I'm a get your hands dirty kind of person, so I would be willing to volunteer to do any of those activities. I love the beach cleanup. I didn't go this week because I was sick in bed. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other council questions? No? Mr. Gunn? No? Anyone in the public would like to ask a question? Okay, so back to the council. Last chance. All right. So thank you very much. Oh, wait, I did have one question for you. I need to ask you the same thing. If you are not selected as a board member, are you willing to serve as an alternate?
Of course.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Okay, so Patty has prepared ballots. We're going to do this a little different because Vice Mayor Gunn is not here. So we currently have ballots with two columns, and there's two names. Line 1 has Ms. Cornell, and line 2 has Ms. Roberts. First column is regular member, second is alternate member. Whenever we take the vote, you're going to put a Y in whichever candidate or neither that you would like to vote for the regular member, and then you will do the same for the alternate member. Remember, you are not required to check yes on either box, but it does require a minimum of 4 votes for each candidate for them to be elected onto this board. So in Vice Mayor Gunn's case, what you will have to do is just hold up your ballot sheet. Does that work for you? Okay, great. All right, so does everyone have a ballot? And if so, let's go ahead and vote. You have to open it. Vice Mayor Gunn, you have to open your ballot.
Are you ready for mine?
We'll start with you, sure.
Okay. Looks like the one for Ms. Cornelli on the regular.
Regular member and Ms. Roberts for the alternate member. Okay, there, now it's up. Thank you. Councilmember Baker, Ms. Cornelli for the alternate.
Wait, you're gonna say who the votes were for? This could give me big trouble.
So, Councilmember Baker, Ms. Cornelli for the alternate, Ms. Roberts for the regular. Councilmember Notero, Ms. Cornelli for the regular, Ms. Roberts for the alternate. Councilmember Roberts, Ms. Cornelli for the alternate, Ms. Roberts for the regular. Mayor Gaddis, Ms. Cornelli for the regular, Ms. Roberts for the alternate. Councilmember Shirley, Ms. Cornelli for the regular, Ms. Roberts for the alternate. And Councilmember Zabel, Ms. Cornelli for the regular, Ms. Roberts for the alternate.
Okay, we have 5-2 on the regular for Cornelli, and we have 5-2 for Roberts on the alternate. So Cornelli is the regular member, and Roberts is the alternate. Congratulations to both, and thank you so much for volunteering. All right, we're on to item number 16, which is consideration of appointment of an interim city manager during the city manager search process. First off, do I have a motion? And please clarify.
So moved.
That doesn't work.
I move to consider the appointment, the interim city manager.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Boyd Roberts, you have the floor.
The city manager has provided us with a recommendation, which I think is wonderful. The only question I had, Lynn, had to do with when does it actually begin? When does it go into effect? If we approve it tonight, when does his additional pay kick in?
I'm planning on hitting the road on Wednesday, and so I would think it would take effect then. And then I am planning to come back for the budget workshop to put that out, which I told you before that I would do.
So, but his increase would still stay in place once
Yes.
it starts?
Yeah, and I'll just be as needed from that point on.
Okay.
Get through the budget workshop. And any changes you make at that, we'll make sure they're all updated and whatever. And then I'll be as needed. I will be on vacation. I'm taking, what do you call it, terminal vacation.
I would like to make a recommendation for one minor change, and I spoke to Mr. Reeves a little bit earlier tonight about this. So currently listed as $2,000 per month. I would like to alter that slightly to say $1,000 per pay period. This is every 2 weeks, just to make it more rounded rather than have to multiply the $2,000 by 12 and then divide it by 26. You know, to come up with some number.
You just gave more days.
I did.
I'd like to amend that motion and make it as June 1st instead of guess you wanted to do it Wednesday.
Well, this is, I mean, we could do it effective today, and that would be the start of the pay period. But I was, like I said, I'm leaving on Wednesday.
So today is the start of the pay period?
Yes.
I think that would make sense.
As a function of procedure, sorry, I'll bring you more time, Attorney, I just want to make clear what you folks are doing. Pursuant to your charter in section 3.01, the city council by majority vote appoints the manager of the town, of the city. Once you appoint whomever you appoint, and they become the city manager, the interim city manager, they are the person vested with all the authority of that office. And so while Mr. Reeves has kindly offered, donated, however it's working out, to be available, return to facilitate meetings and things that can see projects through, upon his return, that office doesn't change unless this body somehow changes it. Whomever assumes that office will have that office until you hire your next manager, or otherwise remove that person from office. And so just to be clear, since there's this element of Mr. Reeves, which he doesn't ride back into the sunset and become sheriff again, you have your manager, and that's a fixed individual, and that's so that there's predictability in operation of your government.
Thank you very much.
Before you took your position, it was Mr. Reeves was going to be an advisory council more than city manager, which he relinquished the job. So he's coming back to help us as an advisor.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish to make that clear both for the benefit of the public and you folks. And just again, now getting back to procedurally where we were in the meeting, Member Roberts had made a motion. Member Baker had suggested that proposed amendment. That motion was not yet seconded, and so procedurally, parliamentary procedure. I don't know if you wish to clean that up before you, or if you are amenable to that motion that proposed amendment expressing that.
What I would like to do is I would like to hold off. I know that everyone wants to make motions, but what I would prefer to do is hold off until we hear from Mr. Michael. And I'd like to hear from him. Would you like to come up and address the council and introduce yourself?
Kyle Riefler, the Assistant City Manager for the City of Bel Air Beach. I'm looking forward to having this opportunity if you guys see fit. I'm excited to work for this wonderful city. Been working with Mr. Reeves past 2 months, getting familiar with everything I was not already familiar with. And during the time as an interim city manager, I am confident that I can prove to you that I'm capable of for your consideration for the full-time position.
Any questions?
I think we're blessed to have him. I mean, you've been doing the assistant for a year now, right?
Approximately, yes.
And he's hands-on. He's in the building, he's out there, he's a great guy.
Leslie? Mr. Roberts?
I agree.
Shirley?
No questions, just thank you for walking us through this.
Mr. Zabel? No, I agree. Vice Mayor Gunn?
I think the city attorney had some concern about this. Just want to make sure we know what we're doing, because with my background, there is such a thing as just acting. He carries all the authority in the absence of the city manager, but it kind of clears up this concern of the city attorney. But I'm all for him. I think Kyle can very appropriately handle the lower of the city manager in his absence.
Okay. I know that you had a motion, and you had a motion, so you went first, and you wanted to change it to $1,000 every pay period. Yes, is that correct? All right, and then we have to go with that one first. So do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
That was Mike Zabel?
Yes.
All right. Back to the council. You're there. Can we do this just by a voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we just got a raise and you're not even hired. Okay, so there was a second motion, and that was brought out by Frank Becker.
Just started at this pay period, which is today, I believe you said.
Yesterday.
Yesterday?
That's right, too.
And I don't think that we actually had a start date on this.
No.
Is that correct? So we can, do we have to put the start date on there? Or do we go ahead and go through this procedure?
Generally speaking, when entering into an employment agreement with the manager, it's customary to have an effective date, so you know, again, who has the authority at any given time. And so you may wish, you can set that for today. It's a little complicated, but you can do that just by the back to that work.
Okay, would you please make a motion and list the date that you would like it to?
My motion is the effective date of this pay increase would be right now, since the council voted unanimously to approve it as our interim city manager.
That vote is not yet happened.
We are amending the amended motion. So the first motion was to amend the current, the current consideration for appointing. So what we're doing is we're adding some stipulations to that. So now, right now, the motion is approved to do $1,000 per pay period, and now you're wanting to amend it
As soon as the council votes.
It goes effective today. All right, so let's see if I've got this right.
My advice would be that it take effect immediately upon the conclusion of this meeting.
That's even better. Thank you. Way better, because it's starting to get a little dicey. And do we have a second on your motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, that's from Leslie. So now we have consideration of appointing an interim city manager during the city manager search process with an effective pay rate of $1,000 per pay period, beginning or effective immediately following this vote.
Can we change it? You have to watch that. It's an increase. It's not total. It's an increase of 1,000 pay period.
Correct. You're going to have some help writing this out.
So the motion on the floor, Mayor, is as you stated, to increase the compensation by $1,000 per pay period, taking effect upon the conclusion of this meeting. Is what I believe you have, if I'm capturing properly your communication. That's what I'm understanding the motion on the floor to be. It's already been 1,000 pay periods, but setting this specific time is Mr. Banker's motion on the floor that's been seconded and not yet made.
Correct. Okay, do we have a second on that motion? That was Leslie, right?
Yes, Leslie.
Okay.
And then you have public comment? And then
Yeah. Okay, well first let's start with the comments from the council concerning the amended motion. Any comments? No?
Just one clarification, we're just voting on the pay rate.
This is actually consideration of appointing an interim city manager during the city manager search process.
The term you said was approving the pay and the effective date of the pay.
Yes.
So that's what we're voting on, correct?
What we're not, what's missing from this consideration is who is
correct. We're not at that stage yet.
Right.
We're structuring the agreement.
Yeah. Vice Mayor Gunn, do you have any comments?
I guess I'm not clear on why you're considering this. The city manager made the recommendation on a pay raise. When he leaves, that's the effective date of Kyle stepping up to MC acting city manager. So I guess I'm not quite sure why we're going here. The guy, poor guy hasn't even been in the office yet. You're already getting consideration to this. I guess I'm not quite sure where we're going with this. That's my own comment.
Yeah, my comment was, you have to be clear on the word you use, acting. This is not an acting, this is an interim.
Right.
Which means he's out of the chair and the new city manager is Kyle for the interim.
So the question is it going to be interim city manager effective this evening when we take this vote?
That's the motion on the floor. Well, the motion, were it to proceed to an individual, the motion on the floor is for it to operate in that function. To the extent I'm pausing and I'm trying to reconcile because I'm learning a little bit on the fly and where you are. Your added concern here is Mr. Reeves is still an employee with vacation leave that he intends to take, and his employment title is city manager. If you unseat him from that position effective tonight, as the interim, with an interim and no clear successor, he is your aim is not to, it's my understanding that it is not your aim to terminate Mr. Reeves' tenure before he exhausts his leave and whatever else. And so that was part of why I previewed, you're putting somebody new in the seat. I'm not presently aware of those that exist. I'm not aware of an independent agreement with Mr. Reeves that would start today that would have him as an employee with all his, a contracted employee. I don't know if I don't know if he has an employment contract. And my apologies, I wasn't clear where this was going and what the anticipated procedure was, but the challenge is, and Mr. Guns have noted, if he's acting manager, he has that authority. However, you have somebody in the seat. For example, if in another community I serve, it is established by resolution that if the manager is incapacitated for any period of time, so-and-so is the person with all the authority, but the moment they're back on the scene and capable, they never cease to hold that title. And so the tension that we're trying to reconcile here is you have a manager who will still be on your payroll taking their entitled vacation leave as they generally downshift and off board, but you do need somebody who will serve that function day to day while they're on that leave. And that is customarily referred to as an acting manager. And acting is not, it's not emphasis on acting like they're pretending that they don't know what they're doing. It's they have the authority on site. They are actively serving in that role. And so that is the tension that needs to be reconciled.
I think the vice mayor was picking up on what I was afraid was going to happen. Is it feels like this is incomplete. All the pieces are not there. And does that sound correct to you? Is that kind of what you're picking up on? Is that
the pieces can be there. I don't know that we've reached that point yet. And ultimately, that's under the charter. You are the body with the authority to appoint a manager and dictate how that position is filled or who is serving in it at any given time. So you have the capacity to put those pieces in. However, these issues should be reconciled so that you don't have confusion as to where Mr. Reeves sits in his tenure relative to whomever you have serving in that role while he's traveling beginning Wednesday and thereafter.
And the timeliness has not actually given us the opportunity to hash these things out.
This is a time-sensitive issue, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
When you gave us your resignation, was it end date or what? I don't think that it was the right end date.
I didn't give you, what I did, I gave you your 60 days notice, and I told the council as a group that I would help in any way, shape, or form, and that I wanted to take some vacation.
So if you tack your vacation onto your resignation date, what is your resignation date?
It's probably sometime in July.
End of July?
Yeah, somewhere in there. I'll say third week of July, I think.
Which is what we were asking for, and that's probably where there's some gray area, because now we would have a standing interim and a standing city manager at the same time.
Right.
And you can't do that.
No, your charter contemplates one person holding that office and only one person. And so that it is customary in municipal operation generally that in some communities it's mandated that there be a resolution on file who states who would be the manager in the absence of the manager. But I'm not aware of a policy here in that regard, but what I would say is, at the very least, in your business this evening, I would suggest that you determine for any amount of time that Manager Reeves is absent from the jurisdiction or otherwise incapable of fulfilling, discharging his duties, who will be the person to serve that role, whether that be for his 3 weeks of leave or if, God forbid, somebody gets hit by a bus tomorrow, you know what happens next. And so in this case, you can have an acting manager. That would probably be your best course of action at this stage, to have an acting manager while still allowing Mr. Reeves to fulfill whatever benefit. Correct.
Acting, and then upon his
eventual separation,
yes.
You would either at that stage have your interim, or I know that you were also expressing some concern about timelines on recruitment, but if somebody's recruited before the end of July, that's something else, then you won't need an interim. But if you don't conclude that phase, then you would need an interim to get you from the end of July to whenever in August or September that you finally reach your final candidate. So that individual, for example, because the discussion was centered around Mr. Rayford, and I don't mean to talk about you as though you're not rude, he could be acting through, to use the parlance that's been used so far, the end of July, become interim at end of July, and then you hire somebody thereafter to be your manager without qualification.
And there would be no conflict with our charter if we had an acting city manager.
No, it would actually, I mean, you should always know who the person's, it's sort of a more succession plan. It is customary to have who has all the authority of the office by decree of the council in Mr. Reeves' absence. Because if, God forbid, putting aside his anticipated retirement, if Mr. Reeves were to fall into a coma tomorrow, you would want to know, well, who is going to, I know it's terrible, but
we're going to have to put that in place.
But it's important to know who operates, and I will tell you, I'm speaking from a place of experience. In another jurisdiction that I represent in this county, they went from a manager retiring to an interim manager. That interim manager in turn resigned, and then it was this, and we had to keep saying that, 11:59 on Tuesday, they ceased to be the manager, and the next manager will be, and constantly establishing, and we went through about 5 in a year, in terms of succession and shifts, and then even once we reached that final one, it was, okay, and if anything happens to you, who makes the call? Or if you're stuck in Mexico on vacation and without communication, who makes that? Who has the authority to say you're terminated because you've done something terrible in this town, or yes, sign that contract? It's just succession planning, much as we have the president, vice president, speaker, et cetera, in our federal government.
Mr. Mayor?
And I know this has gone far afield of where you intended to be, my apologies, but I want to make sure you're executing precisely what you intended.
Wouldn't it be more prudent if we go back to the original plan and just change Mr. Reed's title to advisor? Leave the memorandum, except for the word changing for $1,000 for a pay period?
Vice Mayor Gunn.
Or the other way to clean up the muddiness of this thing is whenever Lynn Reeves isn't in pocket to fulfill his city manager duties, the assistant city manager becomes the acting city manager. So, I mean, if you want to, all it would take would be a resolution designating the assistant as the acting city manager in the absence of Lynn Reeves or his city manager. So, I mean, even at the point where Lynn Reeves' resignation becomes effective, you still have an acting city manager, and at the end of the hiring process, you designate who the city manager is. And up until you designate who the city manager is, Kyle is the acting city manager with all the authority of Lynn Reeves in his absence. That's my opinion.
I'm reaching out to the city attorney to guide us through this. I think that's the best route.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, Mr. Baker. Your point is well taken, but however, that's complicated by the fact that your city manager, Mr. Reeves, has an employment agreement, and as I sit here now to reconcile that with a proposed course of action, removing him from office, and what would he be entitled to on the spot, and it gets very, very convoluted.
I'm not trying to remove him from office, I'm trying to do a title change.
No, I understand that, but his employment agreement contemplates him serving with a specific title. And so that's the challenge. I understand you're not trying to terminate him, but it's what recourse could he have, et cetera. And my job is to consider those eventualities. I would say your best bet is, as a council, you can informally vote to designate Mr. whoever, Mr. Reifler, sorry. Which one is it? Riefler. Mr. Riefler as the acting city manager in the absence of Mr. Reeves. And that would be the simplest way, and it's in line with what Councilmember Gunn suggested. It's just by your vote you could establish who would be the acting manager. It would be Mr. Riefler. And if you wish to set terms for that, we can also take an agreement and retroactively apply it, approved at a subsequent hearing as to what the compensation would be for added service in that role, et cetera. We can look at that. But as far as most narrowly, what you're trying to achieve tonight is ensuring that when Mr. Reeves leaves on Wednesday for what he's described as his terminal leave, you know who's in charge. And this body has the ability to do that by a motion, second, and vote, and say, and that would I think effectuate the goal that you're trying to achieve here.
Okay, so would you be kind enough to give us the correct motion that incorporates everything that we're trying to accomplish tonight, so that someone here can actually make that motion and we can move forward? Because we're going to be here all night. And I also think it's a good idea to name the candidate in this
motion in particular. At this stage of the proceedings, I agree with you, Mayor. That's appropriate. Member Shelley, for surely it sounded like there was something you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't mind taking a stab at it, just if you want to, and it's still moving.
I work at your pleasure, so you tell me how you'd like to proceed.
Well, I mean, it seems pretty simple. I just would like to make a motion to appoint Kyle Riefler as the acting city manager in the absence of Mr. Lynn Reeves. And also, well, I was discussing pay, I was going to say, and then also in consideration for the added duties, pay increase of $1,000 per pay.
Is that a motion?
That was my motion.
Second.
You didn't mention the effective date.
Well, she did mention the effective date because it's functionally in his absence, on his absence. The only, sir.
Yeah, the only question I would have, and you sort of talked about it earlier, so when Mr. Reeves comes back into town, we can't be bouncing back and forth on this. That doesn't make any sense. So he comes back into town, and we're saying, okay, now Mr. Reeves is in charge. That's going to be very confusing to file in the whole city. You said in his absence, so when he comes back into town, he's not absent anymore.
Correct.
So who's the city manager?
In that instance, it would be Manager Reeves.
City Manager Reeves.
That's a problem.
It's no different than what we've been doing
Well,
now.
it's not necessary. I understand why it's a problem in terms of wanting it to the cleanest, most desirable approach is somebody ends on this day, somebody ends on that day. Your complication here is really a complication as a result of an embarrassment of riches. You have a manager who's retiring and willing to make themselves available on an ongoing basis while they reach their retirement date, rather than say, full stop, don't call me, lose my number after this day. And so that we're trying to navigate that while balancing the needs, of your form of government. And so I agree with you that the complication there to me is not so much in who's in charge, because it's very clear. Whenever the man's in the building, the man's the manager. But the complication there is in as much as you start adding compensation to it, and his compensation is based on when he's serving in that role, and he's playing peekaboo with the role. That does complicate how do we establish what his compensation is. So my strong recommendation to you at this stage would be to establish who is going to be in the role, beginning which date, and it can be acting. The motion that you made is very close to what I would have said. And it would have been to establish that Mr. Riefler be appointed as the acting city manager in the absence of Mr. Reeves until such time as Mr. Reeves vacates the office or you otherwise hire somebody else. That's basically what you're trying to achieve. compensation and otherwise, I think that there's still time, with all due respect to Mr. Riefler, I don't know what plans you've made in your life around this potential compensation, but that element, I don't know when this body is next to convene. It sounds like we'll be convening sooner than later based on your manager recruitment processes anyhow, and that can be addressed in a matter of a few weeks when you meet and backdated to, hey, he's been assuming this, if we can find a way to clean that up and reconcile it with the informed knowledge of Mr. Reeves' contract, the acting manager agreement, the responsibilities and duties. So the concise statement is take the motion Ms. Shirley had made, go with that, right up until there was a compensation element, resolve compensation benefits and otherwise at a later date if need be. But really for continuity of government, which is my core concern for you as a community, would be to handle that tonight and that only, and deal with how people will be compensated, and then that may give you time to also reevaluate what your current configuration is. I'm not the chair, so I'm not going to call Roberts.
Is there a way to word it so that the effective date that we choose for Kyle, he becomes the, not the interim city manager, but the acting. And he is in that role from that point forward. So is there a way to word it in such a way that Mr. Reeves, from that point forward, will never be considered the city manager? For a couple of reasons, because I know from a council standpoint, we would like the opportunity, and I know he's going to excel, to evaluate Kyle in this role full-time. So while we're going through this process, he's one of the candidates, obviously.
Short answer, yes. Is there a way to do that? Yes. It's basically the first half of our discussion right up until what's this complication. The challenge, the complication here is you have an employee who, by all accounts, you wish to steward towards retirement and allow them the benefit of all of their accrued benefits and otherwise, and that takes time. And what you don't have in this moment is time. And so my challenge for you is how are you going to reconcile the interests of, this is not a situation where you're terminating a manager because you're done with them, you're through with them, we need irreconcilable differences. Usually in those scenarios, it's very clean. After this meeting, you mean right in the middle of the meeting, you leave, hey, you come up and you sit here. That's not what you're trying to do. I don't wish to suggest you are. But if you make it such that Mr. Riefler is the manager effective tomorrow at 12:01 a.m., then to the extent Mr. Reeves has an employment contract that entitles him to compensation, benefits, leave accrual, etc., how do you reconcile that with the fact that he doesn't actually have an office in your city anymore?
Right.
And so I'm trying to balance those interests by saying the best way to do this is you're functionally the placeholder of making him acting, and if that gives us time to reevaluate, maybe we enter into a separate agreement with Mr. Reeves to reconcile that would make this cleaner down the road. And my duty is, as much as I respect and have enjoyed working with Mr. Reeves, my duty is to you as the body. If this body feels to realize, like, you know what, I didn't quite appreciate that this worked that way, we can talk about a different voluntary separation agreement or anything else. But in the here and now, and again, I'm not suggesting Mr. Reeves needs to leave. I'm trying to balance all your interests and present you the multiverse of options before you. The here and now option that is most viable is the motion on the floor that does not have a second, which is that Mr. Riefler serve as the acting city manager for the city of Bel Air Beach upon the absence of Mr. Reeves from the jurisdiction. Or basically that's the motion. Basically, in his absence, Mr. Riefler serves, and when he returns, then Mr. Reeves is vested with that authority until such time as he either departs again or the city council takes some action that is not consistent with him retaining the time.
Is it smart to list Mr. Reeves exclusively, or is it in absence of city manager? And that way we actually do have a backup city manager in the event that someone else is hired for that position.
Big picture, I would ordinarily say yes, but given your current landscape, not really. It's my understanding that Mr. Riefler may well be one of the candidates for that office. Yes. And so in the event he were to ascend to that, and there's no presumption that he would, you've not really achieved anything. And so I would say that your better bet is to just address the here and now and not try. We can put a pin in, and trust me, after the conversation we've had, I'm not going to forget this. You know, getting a procedure in place for that going forward. Once we get to a permanent manager, it may well be a resolution that we do right after we approve the contract for that individual, and deciding who those people or persons would be in what order. But in the here and now, I think your motion, Member Shirley's motion on the floor is the most appropriate motion for you to consider, absent any reference to compensation.
All right, Ms. Shirley, would you please repeat your motion?
Yes, my motion is to appoint Kyle Riegler as the acting city manager in the absence of Mr. Lynn Reeves.
I'll second that.
Member Nataris.
Okay. I like that. Council comments?
Go ahead. Well, Mr. Roberts brings out a good point about, is he in the chair or not in the chair? And I think the two of them work splendidly. I mean, Mr. Reeves actually brought Kyle here. I don't think there's going to be any conflict. But I like what Mr. Roberts said about, we want to evaluate this man. So how do you really evaluate him if there's like a gun over his head, or maybe it's a bad expression, flying or today, guns, wait. I think he needs full authority. He does, but if he comes back for a day, 2 days, he doesn't have it.
Well, I don't think that, it hasn't been an issue to this point. I know Lynn's agreed to help us through budgeting. I think that's a good opportunity for Kyle to learn from Lynn what the budgeting process is. So I think that, I think you guys are reading too deep into this. Kyle has the authority, unless Lynn is in the building, and, you know, but I don't see Lynn coming in and going, Kyle, sit down and shut up, I'm taking over. I just don't see that happening.
I agree with Councilman Shirley, and specifically what you just stated, that we're going to evaluate him. That's unfair to all the other candidates. We can't be doing that.
Well, the only question, and I have to agree with Mr. Baker, that it plainly says in absence. So he's no longer the acting city manager in absence of city manager Reeves. So if he walks in the door, you're no longer the acting city manager.
That's my problem.
Oh, yes, Vice Mayor.
I was just going to say, I think we're learning more in this thing, and this acting really clears it up a lot. And I don't see Lynn coming in and trying to reassert herself. And nothing prevents Lynn from coming in and saying, Kyle is still acting. I'm delegating all of my city manager authority to Kyle to make decisions on the spot right now because I'm fully employed taking care of the budget or something else. He can do that just about any time. He's delegate his responsibilities to Kyle. So I think we're concerned about too much here. And I think this is the most robust solution we're going to come up with. So I'm fully in support of Councilmember Shirley's motion.
Though I've not found the specific language on delegation that is standard practice, if you wish to clean it up yet further, the motion could be in the absence or declared unavailability of Manager Lynn Reeves. And that way, if Mr. Reeves' presence alone is the invocation, you could say, I'm here, but consider me unavailable. That's the only other thing I can offer to you as and I'm not trying to be pedantic about this. I'm trying to respond to your feedback and quell your concerns. So your other option could be to be in the absence or declared unavailability of the manager. Then that would address the, hey, yeah, I'm in the building, but like I'm not here to answer questions. I'm not here to do stuff. I came to pick up a pen I left. I'm not trying to make official decisions. That would be the closest I think we could get to reconciling each party's concerns tonight with an understanding that I do think this matter may likely need to be revisited in the near term.
What did you call it, declared unavailable?
Declared unavailability. And then that way, that gives explicitly it's in the absence or declared unavailability. You've got a motion in a second, so they would have to express a desire to amend their motions, but if you go that route, that leaves no doubt that Lynn has the authority the ability to seek that, and his mere presence, while his mere presence may trigger it, he can also then functionally decline that ability.
Would you like to retract your second while she corrects her motion?
Yes, that's fine, or I'll move to amend, I don't know.
Okay, I'll amend the motion, and my motion is to appoint Kyle Riefler as an acting city manager in the absence or declared unavailability of Mr. Lynn Reeves.
Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Have we discussed this enough?
It's been.
Why would we not want to go ahead and put the compensation in there? Now that we've kind of addressed that.
Compensation was in there.
It's without reference to compensation. And the reason that I'd suggested that it complicates matters is to the extent Mr. Reeves can, at his election presence, assume the office, are you then not compensated today, where I don't have an employment agreement, I don't have all these other documents that I want, and I don't know how your payroll works, are you going to then prorate Mr. Riefler's compensation by minus 24 hours of that 1 week and minus 36 hours? I don't think so, but you could do it, but then they're not really being compensated for the services rendered. You could do it, it's your prerogative. It's just, I could see just as easily as you saying, as far as I'm concerned, he should have it for as long as he's available to serve that office, and you could certainly do that. I was trying to not eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? Let's determine who's going to be in there and what they're, and then if you wish to resolve that, you can. But my complication was then if one person says, well, I'm not comfortable using those funds during that time to compensate Kyle, it's not really holding the title per se. And so I'm trying to balance, based on the feedback and comments I'm hearing, trying to reconcile that and say, the first bite is who's going to occupy the office and when. Let's figure out who and when, and we can retroactively resolve for what compensation, if we so desire. If you wish to, I would say my advice to you would be do that first, and if you wish to talk about compensation, we can have that conversation next. But at least decide who's going to be assuming the office the moment Mr. Reeves starts driving away from the jurisdiction.
Any other comments before I go to the citizens? No? Citizens? Yes, sir.
John Hansen, 103 22nd Street. I lost track of the number of times you beat this poor house to death. I really have. The motion as it's made right now makes sense. The one thing that is totally complicated your decision process, you don't have an actual date that the current city manager is retiring. He's given you a 60-day notice. He's given you an agreement which you agreed to make available for assistance down the road with the budget and so forth. Now, there are two of us physically in this room and one remotely with military experience, and I'm going to give you an example. Terminal leave, prior to discharge or retirement. You have so many days on the books. You know when your last day is. My question to you is, and to us, the citizens, when is his last day? If you had that information, it would have made your decision process much simpler, much quicker, and a whole lot less complicated.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes.
Briefly, technically, do we still have a vice mayor on?
He goes in high.
Thank you.
Rita Sloan, 8th Street, Melbourne Beach, Florida. I certainly appreciate all the time you've taken tonight to discuss this and make sure it all gets ironed out so it's correct. Another idea might be for them to go ahead and leave on the 8th, and you guys give him a severance package to pay him for all of his vacation time that he has coming. That way, Kyle can go ahead and take over as the interim, and that would resolve all of that. But it's an idea to go ahead and give him the severance package. That's all I'm going to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizens? Oh, back to the council.
Is that last comment workable? That I'm sure you're staying on health benefits with the city till and the other comment from the citizen about we should have a hard date that you're leaving.
Well, I can do that with the calendar and give you, but it's like I said earlier, it's like July 22nd or something.
So if we gave you a severance package and we've already approved your travel expenses coming back and everything like that, would that not clean everything up here?
The short answer is yes. A severance package as it's being described, I would call it a severance agreement, would clean that up, and that's sort of what I've very vaguely been referencing throughout this is you may wish to revisit, you as a council may wish to revisit if this arrangement, this sort of semi-formal arrangement works best for you. However, if you decided, and Mr. Reeves was amenable to it, we could talk terms and see if an agreement can be meted out that memorializes a specific end date, compensation, how his leave and benefits would be handled. That's not something that you're going to met out at this day as this evening. At least on my advice, I would not advise you do so until such time as, again, your legal counsel has the benefit of seeing what is he entitled to in his current employment agreement, what does your insurance provider provide about coverage for somebody depending on what his status is, and those sorts of, those factors all go into a efficient and effective severance agreement so that we don't leave anything undone and unresolved, because if we try to do it on the fly, invariably there will be something we missed that will, one, subject you to heightened criticism for this process, and also two, not fully memorialize what you would have done with the ability to prepare. And so there may be value in reconvening this month or early in the next month to address that, but in the here and now tonight, I think your motion on the floor is adequate, and you folks can mull over whether or not that needs to be addressed at a later date.
Okay. Yes, Leslie.
Can we call for a vote? I mean, what do we need to do? Discussion, the horse is dead.
Well, I have to allow you to discuss it as long as you need, and if everyone's ready, we can take the vote. Vice Mayor Gunn, are you good with that?
I'm good. I'm just going to say this is the motion on the floor is very robust. It's very robust, covers all the cloudiness and vagaries. When the race is absent or declares his absence, then Kyle Riegler is acting city manager. Very clean. And we deal with the bonuses and paying issues later. I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Shirley and the Vice City Attorney.
Okay, all right. If everybody's satisfied with this motion, we will move forward and take a vote. Patty, this is for appointing Kyle Riegler as acting city manager in absence of city manager Reeves.
Or declared unavailable.
Or declared unavailability.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Shirley. Aye. Councilmember Zabel.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Notero.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gunn.
Aye.
Mayor Gaddis.
Yes, so it passes 7-0, and we now have an acting city manager. All right, next, do we need to address the compensation? And if so, would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to address the compensation.
And I have more specifics.
I'd like to make a motion with the new acting city manager to address his compensation to increase it $1,000 per pay period effective immediately.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roy Roberts. You have the floor.
I believe since council voted to give him the responsibilities of this great city and acting city manager, he deserves compensation for it. End of story.
Roy Roberts.
I would like to further define that $1,000 per pay period. There's 10 days in a pay period, right?
14.
But you don't get paid. If we divide it up in 10 working days, that equates to $100 per day. Very simple number. If we made it $100 per day, and on particular times Mr. Reeves returned, there would be a simple mathematical equation. So let's say in any particular week, you're back one day, now it's $400 for that week, something like that. But it could, if somebody's concerned about that fact that Mr. Reeves comes back into town and he's now the city manager, it's a very simple round number. Unless we're confident that we're never going to have that scenario where you're going to be now the city manager again. You're always going to relinquish that option. As long as we're good on that, then we just leave it $1,000 a pay period and there's no problem.
So I propose something, I think this is going to take a little more thought than we can do sitting at this dais. I think we need to review, enter into an agreement contract with Kyle. This on again, off again pay, I don't think is something that can be done. We agreed to, as long as he's acting city manager, this is his compensation period. It doesn't matter whether Lynn's in town or not in town, that shouldn't matter. So and that's a good reason why we need to kind of put some thought into this and maybe have the attorney present us a employment contract. Plus, we need to look at Lynn's employment at the same time. So I would propose that we have a meeting. We talk about setting up another meeting right now to go over those things as soon as we can.
Is this a motion to table?
It is a motion to table the present motion of compensation.
Well, one question on that. Are we going to?
There's no discussion on the motion to table.
I'll second that motion.
All right, let's take a vote. This is a motion to table the motion to increase acting city managers pay $1,000 per pay period until further discussion. Patty, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Notaro? Aye. Councilmember Baker?
No.
Councilmember Zabel?
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley?
Aye.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes. Yes.
Vice Mayor Gunn?
Aye.
Mayor Gaddis?
Yes. So the motion to table passes. We will address this soon. I anticipate a work session and some sort of an emergency meeting to approve this compensation. Okay, we've got that out of the way. Item 17. This is to authorize the city manager to execute an extension of the Code Enforcement Special Master Memorandum of Understanding. Extend the MOU for an additional 2 years at $175 per hour. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Joey Shirley, do I have a second?
Second.
President Taro. Ms. Shirley, you have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's self-explanatory. We need to keep this agreement in place for many reasons. And unless Lynn wants to elaborate any, I think that's all comments over.
Any other discussion? Let's go to the citizens. No discussion. Back to the council.
Briefly, how many hours have we paid for?
She's on a by code hearing basis. Actually, I think we did a check for her today, it was like $450 for a code here. Something. So it's sporadic. As an example, if we have let's see, what was the most recent court hearing, it was a short-term rental. And I think it costs us $450.
Yeah, because I was concerned about the $25 an hour increase, but it's not 40 hours a week. It's
Oh, no. I mean, I could send you an email with what she was compensated last year. It's kind of hit and miss.
This is the first increase we've had.
Yeah, ever.
And
Since
we've
she
been
started.
with this company for 10 years now. This person's
The original time she started as our code administrator was 2007.
okay. Quite a while.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments from the council? Mr. Dunn is blacked out right now. So, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, 7-0. Mr. Reeves, you're authorized to execute the extension. All right, let's see. Now we go to unfinished business. Does anyone have any unfinished business? No? Okay, the only thing that I have, right, Mr. Gunn, did you have any? I didn't look up, sorry. The only thing that I have right now is the tollway zones. We discussed tollway zones.
And I spoke to Randy about that, and he did send us some information. The tollway zone issue really lies with Beller Shore, because that's the area we're talking about. And Randy can kind of give some more input on that, but we did have a discussion.
You could indulge me a moment, Mayor. I just want to call up my email so I can recall precisely what I stated. In the broadest sense, as we talk about tollway zones, the issue becomes from whose property. My understanding of the beach accesses that were of concern, the beach accesses, the property is owned by Beller Shore, at least in the areas that were of particular concern. Whether the city or town has the ability to, depends on the actual owner of record of the contemplated parking areas. Additionally, there'll need to be appropriate signage to place vehicle owners on notice that they are in a towing zone, how to reach the company that will tow their vehicle. Given that both communities rely on the PCSO, my advice was also to inquire with PCSO if they have any SOPs, standard operating procedures, or legal considerations associated with towing from public property. We would likely be directing that, but your code enforcement is handled by PCSO. And if PCSO says, oh, we don't like doing that, or we're not willing to do that, that creates an ad. And I'm not suggesting they will. But there come times where municipalities want the sheriff's office to do something, and they say, we're not comfortable proceeding in that fashion. So no. And so we need to make sure that I doubt that would be the case, but that we should have that dialogue as well. And finally, the communities need to consider their respective purchasing guidelines concerning the procurement of the contractor to handle towing if it is decided that they want to go in that direction. So if it is in fact Beller Shore's property and it's the only place we're towing from, Beller Shore goes about that. If they have procurement guidelines that require them for a contract of X amount to go out to bid or do an invitation of bids or something like that, just doing that in keeping with those procedures as well.
I think it would be more of a mutual understanding. I understand what you're saying, it's their property, so they would have to do the contract with the towing company and make sure that law enforcement agree with the procedure. We have our own lots also. And going back to the conversation with Beller Shore, the last conversation that I had with him was we were trying to come to some type of terms that would benefit both communities, so that we could work together and make life easier for us and make life easier for them. They agreed that they want to be neighborly with us, but they also understand that there are some abuses that are going on their property. One of the things that I opened up and discussed with them was, what can we do to help you? And their two biggest complaints weren't really, obviously, because there's no umbrellas right now, the two biggest complaints that they had was people abusing their property, trespassing, and just pretty much neglecting their beach, the Bel Air Shore Beach. So the conversation that I had with them was, well, what can we do? And I think mutually we agreed that we should increase the patrol up and down the beach. I did mention that we had an erosion problem and that putting the big cruisers on the beach was probably not the best idea. And then you couple that with the turtle nesting season. So that was one avenue that we went down. The other one was parking access, and who actually goes there. Well, if the sheriff's department is patrolling once a shift and they have to not go by during sunset or after sunset or maybe just before, they're probably missing the peak opportunity to get the most traffic. Also, we hear the education. I also heard that at the Bel Air Shore meeting, but I think both communities as a whole, I think that we agree that if people are just ducking in there, they don't have a sticker, they don't have permission, they have nothing to do with anybody in either one of our municipalities, they're trespassing. And so I think that they're on board with contracting with a towing company. And trust me, a towing company has an opportunity to make money. So they would swoop in there, and every time they saw a car, and they would tow them away, and that would be the end of that. These are all things that we're starting to discuss. So at this time, I really haven't had a huge discussion with the council about it. It's more of a fact-finding mission to see what could be done. And you got the answer for me. And so in the next work session, that's what we'll be addressing is how do we do this if we want to move forward. I can assure you that Bel Air Shore will go along with this, whatever it is that we need. And it's their understanding all they need is some signs that say it's towaway zone. And somebody shows up that doesn't belong there, the towing company will jump all over them and take their car away. They'll only do it one time. And so that's where we're at right now. As far as the topic that you brought up with the umbrellas, unfortunately, right now we're still in a stalemate, and it has to do with a lawsuit and two very strong-willed entities. And I don't think that there's really anything that our community can do except for continuing to extend that olive branch and see if we can break them down. And I think that we're making progress. City Manager Reeves, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think the conversation the mayor and I had was a good conversation. I will tell you that I did contact the sheriff's office and ask him to do more directed patrols on the beach. So hopefully they're doing that. If they're not, then we'll check into that a little further. But I think it's a positive step. A couple other things we talked about was electronic gates. We're going to do some research on that. Actually, we started one company, I think it was in Rare or something like that we're talking to. So the towing was brought up to Randy to see if it was, and I assumed it was going to have to be a Bel Air Shore situation. So I think it may be time to have another conversation.
And I think that they would go along with the electronic gates. The problem is now you have to legally provide every resident in Bel Air Beach with something to get them in the gate. And now it becomes cost prohibitive because let's just say that, Okay, every remote is $75 per household. And you want 2 or 3 of them because you have 2 or 3 cars. And you want one to walk around with so you can get in the small game. All of a sudden, the cost goes way up. For the town of Bel Air Shore, it's not that much because they don't have that many residents. But for the city of Bel Air Beach, it's a huge expense. And so that's why I've kind of shied away from the access gates because it doesn't seem practical. But that would certainly solve most of our problems.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Just today, in talking to a couple of people about our shows, I've talked with many, but they're concerned about the Uber drop-offs. Just today, 2 electric bikes came on at 6th Street. Another one had, and I'm a dog lover, another one had a dog walking the whole way to the beach, okay? Doing its duty, okay? And I understand that that's what upsets them, you know, and I can't think of, go all the way down to the Clearwater Boat Yacht Club or whatever, they have a gate access there, but it's a punch gate, which can't be that expensive.
Well, the problem with that is that whenever you have a population the size of Bel Air Beach, that's a lot of shared access.
You're absolutely right, but I think it would drop, I think it would minimize some of it. It's not going to, it's cheaper is what I'm saying. And I'm not for the gates or whatever, the Kirkby Beach or Kirkby Beach, but what I'm saying is you're going to build that relationship. I think the parking is minimal, really. And I think it's the electronic bikes, Uber drop-offs. Even we're a little bit, you know, we have parking out here where you can park here and then we'll go.
Yeah, I think it just starts with baby steps. Something that both municipalities can agree upon, and then you grow a relationship and work together. And little by little, I think that we'll get over this. But yes, it's taking some time, and it's very unfortunate. But there was a unfortunate chain of events that occurred on the onset of COVID. Suddenly Tampa is down here flooding our beaches and destroying things and borrowing furniture and swimming in people's pools and partying on their seawalls. And it wasn't just there, it was up here some too. So it's just going to take some time to repair the damage. And that's the best answer I can give. Any other unfinished business? No? Council member or Vice Mayor Gunn? No? All right. So now we have council comments. Since I tried the last time to leave them out, this month we'll go in alphabetical order again, and I'll call Council Member Banger.
The only comment I have is 78 years ago today, D-Day. Thank all those gallant and brave men that attacked those beaches and put the end to World War II. A year, 2 months, 3 months later. But thank you up there. I'm looking up in heaven, but God bless you.
Nicely said. Any other comments? No. Councilmember Natera?
No comments.
All right, Councilmember Roberts.
Yes, somebody mentioned about the left-hand turn issue that we have up here right down the street. At our last workshop, I asked the council if I could kind of take the lead on that, which I'm going to do. They all approved it. I do have a copy of the traffic study that was done by Pinellas County. They actually outsourced it. Mr. Reeves gave me a copy of that. It's about 12 inches thick, which is wonderful. But I do have some experience and knowledge in that area, so I am going to pursue that. I strongly believe that there are better options, and my lead question to the county is going to be, tell me what we can do in order to have the left turn signal return. Now, I already know what some of their answers are going to be, but that's going to be my objective, to get that left turn signal, yellow turn signal back, where we have the option, because we've all lived through that. We come up to that light, and now we have a red light, and there's no traffic on the other side, and we're sitting there for what seems like a day. I'm sure it's only 60 seconds, but it's still very, very frustrating. So So that's going to be my goal, to get that fixed. And it was one of those things, yeah, I'm all in favor of the parking tickets for the 6th, 12th, and 19th Street parking area. I appreciate the officer was talking about education. I think the best education is give them a ticket, have them pay the fine, and then they'll be much smarter the next time. So, very quickly, this is a big issue for me. This council recently approved the 12th and 13th Street stormwater project. I went home that night and I actually had difficulty sleeping because I know I was elected, as all of us were, to represent all the citizens of this county. I actually visited a family who's sitting back there now. When I left that meeting to vent so that I could somehow get rid of that, I went home, I laid in bed till 1 o'clock in the morning, I got the remote control, I turned on the television and watched Top Gun, for the first Top Gun, for 2 additional hours. The problem is the following. This council dropped the ball. We are sitting in a position where we could potentially waste $250,000 conservatively of our taxpayer dollars. I'm sorry, that's the only way to say it. And the reason is, let me tell you, there's only like 3 or 4 different things that are happening with these outfall pipes. You have a high tide and no rain. Historically, the city has witnessed problems where the salt water backflowed through the pipe and onto the streets. Kudos to the city manager and team have alleviated a lot of those problems by putting check valves on the end of those outfall pipes. Beautiful. We also have the scenario still where there's a high tide and a huge rain event. That water cannot get out off the streets because the check valves are going to close, and even if there weren't check valves there, because of the head pressures involved, that water could not get out. Good news is the water that's going to be sitting in your streets is fresh water, not salt water. That's all good. You're also going to have a low tide with a big rain event. That's when there's no issue at all. The water goes down the drains, into the pipe, out the outfall, no problem. So that's not a problem. A quick timeline. On May the 2nd, we had a council meeting where this was brought up for the first time. And we decided to table it because there were so many questions asked about it. That was followed up by a workshop on May the 16th. We spent a lot of time discussing the 12th and 13th Street project, and the decision was made at that time, I just listened to the audio again today, to move forward to reject the project. Then, I had a special council meeting on 6/1, which was last Wednesday, walked into the meeting, all of a sudden, it wasn't rejected. People had changed their vote, and it wasn't rejected, so it was actually voted at that point to move forward with the contract and that project. Again, I will say, we're missing the opportunity to review this. The biggest question was, what is the condition of the current reinforced concrete pipe that's under the ground? We have not done our job by videoing those pipes to determine what condition they're in. I just read about a city, I think it was in Wisconsin, where they decided they had an 85-year-old pipe. They decided to remove it. When they removed it, they were like, wow, this pipe is in excellent condition, is what they determined. So they kept that pipe that they took out of the ground. They're going to reuse it potentially on projects down the street. The Army Corps of Engineers has articles talking about reinforced concrete pipe can be good for over 100 years. Yet we're choosing to take it out. It doesn't make any sense because at the end of the day, as I asked the engineer on his job, will that improve these other scenarios I described? And the answer is no, it's not going to happen. We're going to see the same problems, which begs the question, why would we spend that additional money in order to see the same issues? And I'm still unbelieving as to how the votes changed from the workshop to the last special meeting. And that's where we are. And we're taking taxpayers' dollars and not spending it properly. That's the part that makes me uncomfortable. That's our job. Our job is to determine the best way to spend the money we have. We have a finite amount of money, and we need to spend it correctly, period. Thank you.
Councilmember Shirley.
Just a couple of quick comments. There are a lot of people here who wanted to address the buoys. I'm not sure that they're aware of the letter that was sent and the draft, as I'm told. Again, this was during the work session, so that might change. But this was a letter that had to be sent to FWC so that we were now brought into compliance, that we have a plan in place. Doesn't mean that we have to proceed with the plan. Council has not voted on it yet. This was just a holding, a card holder basically for FWC so they would not fine us. So that's to those that looks like everyone left that was asking those questions, but to address that. And then secondly, my second point is back to the drainage issue that Mr. Roberts just discussed. I unfortunately was not here for that special meeting that was called, but we left the work session. We all agreed that we were going to have cameras run into the pipe so we could get a complete picture of what we were dealing with on this drainage project. And the fact that we voted on something that we didn't do our due diligence on is really disgusting to me, that the council would move forward with a vote that we all agreed we would do some homework on and see what needs to be done. The fact that it passed is just shameful that our council agreed to pass that. And that's all I want to say. I hope in the future that we don't act so quickly to move forward with something. We're getting hit with huge increases, and we should have taken a closer look at it.
Councilmember Zabel.
I would basically add to that, if you're complaining about that, you should be here for the vote. But otherwise, thank you, Councilmember Baker, for remembering our VBA veterans.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Vice Mayor Gunn.
Two things. One is this remote access, from my perspective, is working wonderful. I can hear you guys, I can see you, so I'm thumbs up on the audio visual. Secondly, why is it that the two engineers in this collegial body is having problems sleeping with this 12th and 13th Street project? I am in total agreement with everything that Lloyd said, and especially Joey Sherman. If you go back to the minutes, Councilmember Roberts suggested to table the item for review to ensure that the benefit of the project is equal to the cost. We all pretty much voted on that when we came back, and then the next thing that happened, my expectations were that we were going to do some due diligence. We were going to camera the pipes, we were going to go back and look at the cost benefit of this project, the escalation in prices, to consider the budget impacts. With respect to a comment that was made that to avoid analysis, there was no analysis. Between the time that we tabled that and the time that we had a special meeting, there was no discussion, there was no further analysis of this thing whatsoever. I was as surprised as anybody. When I saw nothing getting done, I just sent out the full report so people could at least see what the basis of the initial report was. And it was all simulation, it was all based on, well, it's an outdated design or system, but there was no objective analysis of the condition of the pipes or the problem. It said, hey, it's an outdated design, the problem is small outfalls, and we don't think we can solve that problem because of the easement issues there. So I have some serious problems with that as well. In absence of that, nothing else, where is the deep well plan for where we go from here? I'm not disputing the vote. That's due process, and I understand it. But how we made a decision, there was nothing there. There was no analysis, no further discussion. It just happened. And I'm saddened by that process. If nothing else happens, we need to monitor this project, because as we start digging up the old pipes, we should be archiving the status of those pipes and condition and the structural integrity of those pipes, so that further down the road, we don't make the same mistake. We spent time talking about decals, 4,000, talked about Christmas decoration. We're talking about a 35% increase in a project, $200,000. And we okayed this even before we got into the budget review process. Well, horse cart, something to that kilter here. We haven't even talked about the strategic plan. What are the relevant issues? What are the priorities? Important. We okayed a $200,000 increase in the project, and I'm kind of sad about it. So that's all I've got to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Let's see, I've been made aware that the Tourism Development Council may be able to help the Santee Beach Nourishment project. I also spoke with Mayor Ken Welch at the Mayor's Council. He actually serves on that council, and told him that we were in dire straits. We're one of the lucky ones that we still have a beach, but there are many communities south of here that they have little of nothing left. Their beaches are eroded. We've lost, according to Mr. Reeves, we've lost half of our beach already. So I made a point to pull him off to the side and get his attention on this, and plan on sending him a letter along with other mayors. They're holding the purse strings of about $300 million. That this could be resolved, and it would still require easements to do the nourishment project. However, it would not require a perpetual easement. It would only take a 1 or 2 year easement. But I'm certain that most of the people that are unwilling to sign these easements, they would sign it on a 2 year plan, knowing that they would get their property back at the end of the project. So I'm working on that to see what can be done, and if the county is willing to work with us. If we can get the Tourism Development Council on board, I believe that they will have no problem persuading the county commission to approve this. But we have to keep working, and we'll see what happens. Let's see here. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I'd also like to thank Kyle. Vice Mayor Gunn's already brought it up. The new audio system is incredible. For Patty, she told me that we were at least up to 2019. No, I'm just kidding. Great job, great job. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Frank Baker, do I have a second? Second. Wood Roberts. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Good night, everyone.
Recording stopped.